Our scriptures today speak to us about the relationship between religion and faith. In both our readings, in our gospel lesson today, we see the Pharisees coming to Jesus, and it's easy to demonize the Pharisees, and I don't want to demonize Pharisees. Pharisees aren't bad people. Pharisees are actually the law keepers. You have to remember that in ancient Israeli philosophy, in their theology, they believed that everything that happened bad was God's punishment to us. If we sin, God gets mad. If God gets mad, everybody suffers, because sin is a cancer, and everyone suffers if any of us offend God. And so the Pharisees were constantly, they were raised up to make sure everyone they towed the line and kept the law, because we didn't want God to send us back to Egypt or to destroy the temple or to send in the Assyrians and the Babylonians again. And so they're constantly on the backs of this rebel rabbi named Jesus, who frankly isn't good at law keeping. Jesus is terrible at rule keeping, if you haven't noticed. Terrible at rule keeping. He just basically says, this is what needs to happen, and I'm sorry if you don't like it, but people are more important than rules. Grow up. Right? I mean, that's just who Jesus is. And the Pharisees are constantly angry at him. Today is just another example of that. And they're not bad people. They just really believe that if they don't toe the line, God's going to get mad, and if God gets mad, we all pay. So my job as a Pharisee is to make sure everybody's good. Okay? Everybody has to behave. Why don't your followers wash their hands? There was ritualistic washing of hands. It wasn't a question of cleanliness. It was a religious, a ritual ceremony of washing hands that Jesus' disciples did not always do. Why? This is going to offend God. That's what they're thinking. They're going to make us all pay for their uncleanliness, for their observance or lack of observance of the ritual and religion of our faith. Jesus was really clear. It's not what you do. It's what's in you that matters. It's not about washing hands or not washing hands. If what you have inside you is already defiled, you're defiled. Wash your hands all you want, but if what's in you is filth, then guess what? You're not clean. This scripture has been a little misinterpreted, and I wanted to go off on this just a bit today. There's been a lot of movement in the church that have talked about, ritual's bad. Tradition is bad. I don't like all that ritual and pomp and circumstance of the church because it's what's in your heart. It's not the externals. Well, I think we like ritual. Granted, we're a pretty formal ritualistic church, especially at Grace, probably more so than most other United Church of Christ congregations. But it's who we are, and it means something to us, and I wanted to explore that with us a bit today. You see, ritual is not a bad thing. It's when ritual becomes more important than faith that ritual becomes bad. It's when ritual for ritual's sake keeps us from doing the right thing that ritual and religion becomes bad, right? When religion gets in the way of our being Christ-like, that's when religion becomes a negative thing. And we've seen that happen. It's when ritual becomes more important than what it's supposed to actually affect in our world. COVID has caused us to rethink a lot about our ritual and our religion. And those of us who are more stuffy than others, we've struggled with that over the last 18 months. You want me to do what for communion? Right? It's caused us to struggle about how we redefine what it means to be a community of faith when you're so stuck in your 2,000-year-old traditions. If you have not noticed, I am the curmudgeon of the worship world. If the church had a "get off my lawn" sign, it would have me on it. Right? That's just I'm the traditionalist of the church. And I don't mind that, but I think at some points tradition can also hinder us from being who God intends us to be. Passing the peace looks different now than it used to. Communion looks different now than it used to. Our fellowship looks different now than it used to. And it needs to. As much as I don't like what we do with communion now, I think it's sanitized. I think it takes away from some of what's important in the sacrament. it's what we do to keep each other safe. And while it's not what I want to do, it's what we do because it's what caring and looking like Jesus looks like. And so it's important that we just say, for now, this is how we keep each other safe. There were churches that refused to stop their worship during COVID. You know those churches. They became hot spots, didn't they? And people died. Sometimes we need to rethink our religion in ways that look more like Jesus because our religion keeps us from looking like Christ. I had friends of mine who would kind of rail on Facebook, usually more younger, progressive pastors than I, who would say, I'm really disappointed. We have all this wonderful freedom now to rethink everything, and people are still being so traditional. Why aren't we doing new and innovative things? And this was like last April, in the middle of the height of everything. And I thought to myself, no. In my experience, in my pastoral experience in 30 years of ordained ministry, everything was so crazy different. We're in masks. We're in isolation. We can't find toilet paper. I mean, those basic things you're looking for. Everything was so scary. I think people wanted at least one thing in their life to look like it used to. At least I think a lot of folk were looking for something to hold on to that resembled something they used to know, because quite frankly, nothing in my life looked the same a year ago. And so I think in some ways it was important for the church to continue looking like we always looked, because at least you knew on Sunday morning, even if you were home watching it, something felt normal. And there was something that was a tiny bit comforting. Ritual, I think, though, only has importance if it has a shared meaning. Symbols, rituals, without shared meaning become superstition, don't they? They don't mean anything to anybody. And so we have shared meaning in our rituals. You don't think rituals are important? People say, I don't like all that ritual. Ritual's not important to me. Really? Serve your family spaghetti on the fourth Thursday of November for dinner and see how they react. You don't like ritual? Tell your family you're not going to bother with a tree and presents this December. See how they get along with that fact. We're a people who like ritual. It's just who we are. You can probably think of your family rituals, can't you? You can think of the things that it wouldn't be us if it wasn't blank. In the Taylor part of the Apgar-Taylor household, I have learned that I can add anything I want on Thanksgiving. I just can't take anything away. If I want to try a new casserole for dinner, that's fantastic. I can do all the casseroles I want to do, but you're not taking away the stuff. You're not taking away the marshmallowed sweet potatoes. I can do anything I want in terms of wonderful vegetable dishes, but you sure can't touch the green bean casserole with the mushroom soup and the little crispy onions on top. No, Dad, no. It can't be taken away, Dad. Ritual, tradition, it is in some ways grounding us in who we are. What role does our ritual play in our life today as Christians? Why do we do the things we do here at Grace? It got me thinking a little bit about it, and in case you don't remember, I used to teach liturgy at the seminary, so this is kind of a passion of mine. Worship reminds us that we are not the center of the experience on Sunday morning. Worship reminds us it's not about us. I've had people say to me, I don't really get anything out of that style worship. My response to them is, well, that's good, because you weren't our intended audience. We weren't worshiping you. It was about God. Worship centers us on the idea that it's not about us, and it never has been. Worship reminds us, ritual reminds us, that faith is not a solitary act. And it never was. I've told you before, I had a Methodist bishop who said there's no such thing as a Lone Ranger Christian. We're not meant to live out faith in isolation. It's meant to be a place where we're challenged and encouraged and nurtured, and our butts are kicked, and our celebrations are celebrated, our tears are shared. This is our family where we are encouraged to grow in grace and godliness together. This is the place we go to say, can you help me figure this out? This is the place we go to say, I just need to be vulnerable. Am I safe here? That can't be done in isolation. I've met a lot of particularly younger people who say, I used to be Christian, now I'm Buddhist. And when I question them on why they're Buddhist now, well, I'm more Buddhist. I like to meditate, and I believe in nonviolence. There's an American sort of fallacy that being Buddhist means you just have to not eat meat and not be a jerk, and you don't have to be a part of anybody else's religion. Now I'm Buddhist. No. Having spent time in a Buddhist monastery, when you get to understand Buddhism, it's extremely and deeply, every world religion is extremely and deeply communal. Professing the three jewels of Buddhism, you take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the teaching, and the Sangha, which is the community. Every religion is deeply communal. And so our ritual reminds us we're not alone. We weren't meant to be. Worship helps us center on God's presence. A church with no ritual, a church with no religious symbolism. I've walked into some churches, they look like conference halls. There's not one religious symbol in the entire place. And on the stage, which in a church is called a chancel, by the way, because I'm not performing, I'm worshiping, right? There is no stage in it. Well, there is a stage, it's in the other room. That's a chancel. On the stage, the only religious symbol is the drum set. And it leaves me wondering what it is that we worship here. There is the liturgical drum set. Let me just be arrogant enough to say that when you walk into Grace United Church of Christ, I hope you don't have any question about who it is that we worship here. It's just obvious. Ritual reminds us who we worship. Because worship is the Old English word for worthship. W-O-R-T-H, worthship. Worship reminds us whose worth we're celebrating. And in 2,000 years, it's never been yours or mine, people. Never. Worship grounds us in the generations that came before us. The prayer we prayed this morning in the opening prayer was intentionally from the Mozarabic sacramentary of the 6th century, because I wanted to show you that we're grounded in the faith that came before us. We didn't invent this thing called Christianity, and we're not going to be the last. The robes that we wear remind us of the robes of baptism. Worship reminds us that we're not meant to do this alone. The words of the great creeds, we believe in one God, the Father Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth. We, not I, we. Because we go through this journey together. I've showed you this before, but church architecture reflects theology. Look up, if you will. Everybody look up. What do you see? The hull of a ship. Why are churches designed in the hull of a ship? Because a ship was the main form of transportation in the early church. And so when they started building church buildings, they were making the point that the church, we journey together. We're on the Christian journey. It looks like the hull of a ship. If you take off the roof of the church and you go over top of it with Mark's drone, if you take off the top of the church, it's a cross. If you literally slice the top of our church off and look from above, it's a cross. That's not unintentional. Worship empowers us. Ritual empowers us when it's done right. It equips us. It nurtures us to make a difference in our world. Together, we can make more change than you or I can do alone. Together, we give safe space to the homeless. Together, we provide safe space for those who are going through 12-step programs for addiction, or who are scared, or who are newly diagnosed with HIV. Together, we provide places that people can find health and healing that you or I couldn't do on our own. Together, we filled backpacks for students in this county in need who were starting school and wouldn't have the right supplies. Together, we raised money, and will no doubt after today do it again for the Gulf Coast, for families who are devastated with hurricanes, tsunamis, tornadoes, fires. And I'm telling you right now, we've had the discussion this week at council, and together we're going to be doing some things to help men and women from Afghanistan who helped our troops over and over and over again and saved our men and women's lives and now need safety. This church is going to make a difference in that community too. Why? Because number one, they deserve it. And number two, it's who Jesus made us to be. So be prepared for that journey. Ritual and tradition, I suspect, are not bad things. They can give us meaning. They can give us focus when the rest of the world seems to crumble around us. But Jesus warns us rightly that when ritual and tradition become their own God, they can keep us from reflecting Christ in the world around us. At its best, religion reminds us that we are God's beloved sons and daughters. At its best, religion reminds us of the one who looked into our eyes the moment we were born and fell hopelessly and forever in love with us. At its best, all of this reminds us of what it looks like to be God, Christ for our world. Amen.